Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Knittergy, our knitting show. I'm Inbal. I'm the host, and I'm the designer behind the Knit of the Dragon. And with me are my friends.
Hi there, my name is Duke of Nikko. I am a knitwear designer as well.
Hi, I'm Jen, and I'm also a knitwear designer. Sorry, my cat wants to be part of the show as always. And I design under the name Synapticstitches.
And I'm Scott Strong-Wallace. I have a YouTube channel of GreatScottKnitting, and I also am a yarn dyer under the name of Mount Carmel Yarns.
So let's do a little recap from last episode. On each episode, we're getting a little challenge and we're preparing it for the next episode. So last episode, we gifted to one another a color scheme. We had a little quote that gave us the theme of the challenge, and we had some techniques. And maybe each of us will say what he got and show us the process, and let's talk about it.
So I traded with Duke. My color scheme was green and purple, and I used his inspiration of the pottery from A Wedding Gift and Khalil Gibran quote, and the technique was double knitting. So I had not done double knitting in a while, and I ended up with a purple and green double knit headband. You can see I'm trying to hide my shame, but I didn't weave in the ends yet. As always.
How did
I'll admit I was a little rushed finishing this up. I actually did draw things out for once. So I did like sketch out my pattern on some graph paper. So I like knew what I was doing. I was inspired by in the quote it was talking about like bees interacting with flowers and a bee giving a gift to the flower. So I was thinking about like how do bees communicate, and they leave these chemical tracks to, as they're going out to find flowers and to find nectar. And so the idea was sort of that this line traversing around is like the trace left by the bee, so the other bees know where to follow. And the pottery inspiration was just thinking about like throwing pots on a wheel and doing something circular. So doing it in the round was my nod to pottery. And it's reversible. There's a few little mistakes in there, but I decided to let that slide. And it's just an ear warmer.
Many pottery have this type of decoration on it. Mm-hmm. So I can see the pottery thing.
Yeah. Double knitting is something I haven't done in a long time. It's a little messy.
Are you gonna do it again?
I think I would do it again. And I also, in doing some research, trying to remember how to do this and looking at some YouTube videos online, found that there's a designer called Sockmatician who is working on a book that is double knitting brioche that I'm really excited to see that come out soon. So definitely something that was fun and I'd like to play with some more.
How does double knitting compare to brioche?
I think the first time I did it, I may have like worked one color at a time. So that I feel like is more similar to how I work brioche. I did this both colors at the same time. I don't see either one as super, super hard. I think having practiced fixing brioche mistakes made me a little more comfortable to fix things when I had made a few mistakes in this.
Since Jen did my inspiration, I'm going to do. So my challenge was from Jen, and the technique is brioche, and the color scheme is pink and blue. And the memorable gift Jen got from then boyfriend, now husband, is ivy leaf earrings. Here's my sketch. So I wanted to make ivy leaf with some increases and decreases, but I looked at some images of ivy leaf on Google, and it looks more like this. And I tried to make a chart of brioche using a software, but it was extremely difficult. So I kind of sketched it out. Here's my image.
Wow,
of
so you
pink
did
and
go
blue.
to cable brioche?
No, it's not cable. It's
Oh.
just simple brioche with some increases and decreases.
Looks complicated
So here,
to me.
Yeah, it was more than what
Yeah,
I
I'm afraid like seeing this like
no, it's actually not too complicated. So here's the final result.
oh nice.
Looks great.
It
So,
actually looks like something that Jen would do.
yeah. So I was obviously inspired by Jen's work, but yeah, it has some increases and decreases. So the quote was John Lennon, and he talked about life and what he wanted to be when he grows up, and he said happiness. But this leaf kind of represents life. You know, you make choices and the different paths you can take, but at the end you reach your happiness.
That's
So
so
that's
nice.
the story.
Yeah,
Story behind this ivy leaf.
it's
Very
so cool. Yeah.
Great. And how did you feel working in brioche? Did you feel like that's easy when you're used to double knitting?
Although I made a sketch, you know, I didn't make a detailed pattern, and I kind of free formed. You know, it's asymmetric. It's not really organized, but it is organic. I didn't have to worry about making mistakes. You know, I just went with what I felt like doing. So, in that sense, it was stress free. I always make a lot of mistakes in brioche, and when I'm following a pattern, I get really frustrated. But with this, I had fun doing it.
So you didn't really have a plan, you just went with it?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yes.
I think a lot of people who design with brioche find that making sort of organic, leafy, flowery patterns using brioche increases is actually something that the fabric lends itself to really nicely. So being able to just sort of play and
Mm-hmm.
do it without a plan, I'm not surprised you were able to make that work out.
For me, like knitting without a plan is like, how do you do it? I can't even understand.
I'll go next. Of course, Inbal and I are the ones who traded off. The object was a necklace that her grandmother had given her that she had unfortunately lost as a child. The quote again was from John Lennon, which actually started out with, "My mother always told me that happiness was the key to life." So I loved that, again, that maternal guidance that sort of kind of lended to that grandmother's necklace as well. So a lot of maternal energies going on. My color scheme was red and yellow, very vibrant colors lending towards, you know, energy, happiness, exuberance. So my challenge was to find a way to create a necklace or a necklace motif in knitting. The stitch thing I had was baubles. So baubles was great because it's very three-dimensional. It's very off the surface of the knitting. So that made it actually a very perfect thing to use for creating this little design piece. So I went to my handy dandy Barbara Walker Treasury of Knitting Patterns, which I peruse on a regular basis because I knew she had some bauble designs that I wanted to play with. The Blackberry Bauble pattern, which is a really basic, you know, sort of a bauble design in sort of a triangular shape. So I loved how that kind of looked like a locket type of thing. Then the next challenge was, all right, what am I going to do about like a chain? So I decided to do twisted stitches because they do rise up off of the surface of the knitting. I actually did 2 swatches because I didn't know which was going to pop better, being on a background of reverse stockinette or on a background of stockinette. So I did both. So I thought first that reverse stockinette would pop things better. And of course, here's the colorway.
Oh,
Lots of reds and yellows. And so it kind of gets a little bit lost, especially the chain part, but you can see the bobbles.
Yeah.
But I
It's
think
so
it works.
vibrant, like on camera. I
Yeah.
think the camera is like, can do.
Yeah, it's like lots of color, lots of energy. So on this, it kind of works a little bit better with
Yeah, the
the
stockinette.
just plain stockinette.
Yeah.
Now, if I were going to do this again, of course, I would not use such a busy colorway because I think it hides the pattern. But again, there's those bobbles popping off.
Oh,
And
that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, on the stockinette you can really see.
Did you dye the yarn yourself?
Yes.
Nice.
This was my own, dyed up yarn. I don't have the skein anymore. I just have the ball. I did actually dyed two skeins. I dyed one that was a non-repeating colorway, and then I did this one, which would have been a repeating colorway. So it'd be interesting to see how this might have knit up in the same pattern. But yeah, I did it two different ways.
What do you mean by non-repeating and repeating colorway?
So a non-repeating colorway isn't going to pool. So you notice how this one is just like almost every stitch is a different color. Whereas a repeating colorway is going to pool a lot more. You're going to have more splotches of one color in one spot. So when you have variegated yarn, you're going to either have a variegated yarn that pools a lot. So you'll get lots of color blocks that kind of come along, or you'll have a non-repeating colorway, which is stitches that are just different colors throughout, and there's not going to be any major pooling that occurs.
That's interesting, and you can control it, right? Like
you can control it to some extent into how you place the color.
That's magic to me.
It's really not that crazy. If you want a repeating colorway where you're going to have pooling, you put big blocks of color in, on the yarn in major sections. So this one's going to repeat because you see blocks of color repeating, whereas, I mean, it's a little harder to tell on this, but this, you can see that the colors are just very, very random.
Yeah.
And so if you randomly place your color all over, you're going to get a non-repeating colorway. If you are more intentional and put like big stripes of color, you're going to get pooling.
Is it harder for you when you're dyeing to make those non-repeating colorways? Like that seems like something that you'd have to be really careful not to put big chunks of color in places.
Actually, it's neither way is particularly hard. One of the challenges, though, with creating a non-repeating colorway is because you're layering a lot of colors, it does take somewhat more time to create them, because you want a color to set so that if you're going to layer another color over the top of it, it doesn't become muddied, or you don't get like when you're using red and yellow, you don't get all of a sudden this big orange section. So you have to make sure you're setting your colors right. And other than that, you can just like do little random squiggles and circles or draw hearts or whatever you want to on the yarn, and it'll create that randomness. All right, Inbal, what did you come up with?
My turn. So yeah,
a complete sweater set or what?
Yeah, something big. Prepare yourself. So, okay, I had the same quote of Khalil Gibran. The flower and the ecstasy were the things that I related to. There was the fountain, right? So the first thing that I had in mind was make something for a wall hanging, like that have the heart and the fountain and the flower, and that just something that flows. And then I wanted something like a burst of ecstasy, because he's talking about that. So I wanted to have like a big flower and then rings, and I had a ring, your ring from your husband. So I thought maybe to put rings like hanging, and the technique was mosaic. So I did the heart of the flower, but then I ran out of this green yarn. It's a variegated green. And I don't know, it just didn't feel like it's dark, you know, and I didn't want something dark. It was supposed to be a fountain of life. And then I just let it be, and I was busy. And then I came back like after a week or two, and I read the quote again. And then the thing that stood up was the fountain of life, like the flower is the fountain of life. And I had in my stash green and yellow, which were my colors, and I had a blue. So I thought maybe blue can be like water, you know, coming down like a fountain. And then I started thinking about making something like the ring will be something for the neck, because it has the shape of a ring. So then I started to playing with the idea of having something around the neck, and maybe the ring will be an ornament, and maybe the lines like have some lines. And then it became a lot more complicated. So now I'm gonna wear it. It is something for the neck.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So what I did was the flower, like I had it like the shape of a flower, and just water come down and just become, and like to have something that is like fountain of life. And the ring in the center is, I had for a long time a book about Dorset buttons and jewelry. And I really wanted to try it. And I said, this is gonna be the ring, like to have something from that book just to understand how it's done. There are many things like, so that's what I did. I took the shape. I like the shape. So I attached the ring at the end, and these are just, yeah. And it's all done with mosaic, not color work, although it would be a lot easier to do with color work. but mosaic was my thing. And I did the lines of the blue in twisted stitch. I twisted the stitch so it's going to stand and be more stiff and not fall down. And it worked. Now I have something to wear.
Amazing.
That's a thrilling piece.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually, that would probably be an interesting yoke type concept with that, you know, with the way the mosaic lines, although you could do it in color work, leading up into sort of a turtleneck or a mock turtleneck that then goes down. Because I was thinking, wow, wouldn't that be cool to have that sort of as an overlay on a sweater that's underneath it?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Because I thought, a sweater.
How fun is it when you go out and it's cold to put a yoke, you know, with a turtleneck, but then you get home and it's hot. So you just take off the neck.
The upper piece, yeah.
Yeah. Woo.
Inbal, are you a fast knitter?
Not
How
so
long
much.
did it take you to?
2 weeks. Not that fast.
2 weeks?
No, that's fast.
Wow.
To go from concept to that execution, you did it quickly.
Diagonal, the purple leaves, are those sewn on, or did you pick those up underneath, or how did you attach those?
No, I just knitted them separately and just saw them in the back.
That's so cool. You should really write that up. Yeah, that's another challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's a small thing, but then you have to explain where to do it and when to do it and how to do it. And it becomes 14 pages of explanation. Okay, so today's episode theme is the new year, because we're on January and it's a new year. Let's start just to talk about new projects. how many projects do you have in process until you feel like, okay, I can't start a new project anymore?
When I
What?
run out of needles.
Yeah.
That's when I
When I have about 5 projects, when I start to feel like I can't, it's too much, because I know that I want to finish them all. And so I think 5 is about the number for me where I stop.
For me, it depends on how many what do you consider actually a project that you're working on? Like I have projects that are on needles that I haven't touched in over a year. And I don't think about those. Like those don't count.
Yeah.
But it's like, how many am I actually working on at that time? And I don't really like to have more than maybe 3. If I get above that, I start getting like stressed out because I feel like I'm not making progress on any one thing. I'm just doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and none of it feels like it's getting done.
Yeah, I feel the same way. 3, 2 would be better.
My designs evolve on the needles, so I like to have something that I'm working on like that, and then something that I can work on that's like mindless, that's Zoom knitting or TV knitting, that I don't have to stop and calculate and think.
I like to have a pair of socks on the needles. I like to have a shawl or 2 on the needles. And then, sometimes either a hat or a cowl. I do have a sweater in hibernation, and I have a blanket in hibernation. But like 3 to 4 projects actively on the needles that I'm actively working on, that's about the maximum I can go to. However, I think a lot of times I will be monogamous on each one. It's like I may cast them on and get to like a stopping point, but then like the next day, I'll pick up one of them and take it to the end, and then go to another one and take it to the end.
So you have like your 3 projects, and then you finished one. And how do you decide like what's going to be the next one?
Part of it is how complicated was the last one and what am I in the mood for? Because if I've done something really simple, then I'll probably go for something that's a bit more involved and keeps my interest. I have a Ravelry queue, which there have been a lot of patterns that came out here at the end of the year. It felt like there was like one every other day that was like, I need to knit that next year. I need to knit this one next year. It's like all of a sudden my queue became huge. I'm not going to get to all of them next year.
I have a queue too, but I never select projects from my queue for some reason.
They're already there, I want something.
There's always something bright and shiny that comes along.
I'm more interested in like Instagram feed and new magazine, something new and exciting that I see. Those are the projects I tend to cast on.
So it's more impulsive, right?
Yeah.
Like you see it now and then you get it and then you do it.
I actually haven't knit something designed by someone else since maybe like May. It's been a while. Because I've just had so many ideas that I'm like, I cannot produce my ideas into finished knit items fast enough. So, I jump from big elaborate sweater patterns to my hat and my cowl and like shorter things that I can get through faster because I need to actually finish things sometimes.
That's why I always have something that's not mine. It's like a rest for your mind. I don't want to calculate and figure out things. Sometimes I just want someone else to tell me what to do.
Sadly, this has become my mindless project. I am working on my 4th one right now. I've made 2 for myself, 1 for my mom, and I'm making 1 for my aunt. And it's just like sitting in my bag whenever I need something, that I can knit without thinking about it. It's this.
Yeah.
And I was just staring at those brioche cables, and I'm like, those are hard enough to do as cables. I can't imagine adding the brioche part to it.
Okay, let's go for our first challenge. So the first exercise, we're gonna do something with colors. So I don't know if you know, the Pantone color of the year is Very Perry, which is a blue-purple hue. So for our next challenge, this will be the first color that we're gonna use. And I let you pick some other colors to go with it. You can pick up as many colors as you want, of course. These are supposed to be also a very trendy colors according to whatever celeb's website that I came across.
Now, keep in mind that the purple is made up of reds and blues, and the opposite on the color wheel is yellow.
Yeah, yellow, it seems to me like the obvious selection, right?
Yeah, because it's its exact opposite color.
But who wants to go with the obvious? Come on. When I pick color, I try to feel it. Like I can feel that together with the brown is gonna be kind of a soothing vibe, and with a gray, I would say it's gonna be cold, very cold.
Yeah, it's gonna have that cooler vibe with the gray. Yeah. It's gonna feel earthy, grounded with a tan or a brown.
Yeah, right. These two. This is a very high contrast and like color pop. Maybe the red, I cannot see it working, but maybe it can work. I don't know. Depends on what you do. I really like the teal, like the soft.
Oh, that very light blue would give it a real airy feel.
Yeah, something like very light and or maybe even together with a darker shade. Maybe I think I'm gonna go with these two.
Yeah, I have to say I'm drawn to either the darker, like I like the yellow and purple, but I'm drawn to either the darker teal or the hot pink.
My first pick was yellow.
You see?
So I'll stick with the obvious.
Okay, you're allowed to. It's okay.
I'm gonna go with the cooler colors. I may intensify them a little bit more, but I think I'm gonna go with the gray and the light blue. Depending upon what our ultimate challenge is, I'll determine as to whether it's going to be 3 separate skeins of yarn or 1.
All right, so we have colors. We have our colors. Continue. Now I want to talk a little bit about techniques. So of course, techniques and new beginnings. So what's your favorite cast on?
Long tail, German twisted.
German twisted?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
German twisted long tail cast on. It's nice and stretchy without being flared. I use that for just about everything that is in the round. And if it's not in the round, it's just a standard long tail cast on. Although occasionally I will do a crocheted cast on.
Yeah, if you want to have the stitches later to work with them.
And the way I do a crocheted cast on, use the crochet hook and cast it directly onto the needle. So if I don't want to have to try and figure out, if I'm having to cast on, say, 200 stitches, I'm not going to figure out a long tail cast on for 200 stitches. I'll use the crocheted cast on. It's a little bit easier.
So the crochet cast on, you mean the cable cast on? Like when you knit the stitches?
I don't,
because crochet cast on that I know is like making a chain of crochet and then cast on
and then you
pick
up and then you pick it up. Yeah, so what I do instead is I'll start with a short chain, but then I'll take my knitting needle, just actually crochet it onto the needle.
Yeah, I do the same thing. You wrap a loop around the knitting needle as you crochet.
You crochet with the same yarn that you're working with.
Yep. As opposed to a provisional cast on, which is what you're thinking.
Oh, okay.
The provisional cast on is great because you can take that crochet off and then pick up those live stitches and knit from the other direction.
So if I start with a rib, I use, you can cast on knitwise and you can also cast on purlwise. So the cast on is actually the same stitches of the rib. I think it's a rib cast on.
Yeah, I think so.
So I got not long ago this book, which really helped me deciding if I need something maybe stretchier or if I need 2 colors, like when I wanted 2 colors cast on or bind off. Half of it is cast ons and half of it is bind offs, and it's really, really, really useful. Do you learn new technique only from like YouTube, or do you have some other resources for new techniques?
Depends on how much of a rush I'm in. If I need to pick up something now, YouTube. But I love doing in-person classes. And I think if there's, something big that I want to learn, I would much rather learn it in person from someone, or in a class on Zoom. Maybe I haven't tried that too much. I think when you can learn from a person and not just from a book or from YouTube, there's always that little tidbit that they say that you never would have thought to ask that makes a world look different. You never would have looked it up. You never would have worried about it, but it always is really helpful.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I like taking classes. Vogue Knitting Live does virtual classes every month. So I've been taking a lot of that. And I have a few reference books too, but books are a little hard to learn for me. I need visuals.
I learned a lot of virtual classes, like Vogue Virtual Knitting Live. I took for more than a year, I think, every month. When I discovered it, it was celebration of techniques. You can just learn everything and ask questions, and it was amazing. And I also found Patty Lyon has her courses. She has a lot of tips of how to carry the yarn and how to fix problems. I think she's a really good resource for beginners or for people who want to learn new techniques.
If I'm wanting to learn a new technique, like this next year, man, do I put this out there? Yeah, what the heck. I'm going to try to learn stranded color work. And so I'll go to YouTube. First, I'll go to Ravelry, find a project that I think I can do, like a cowl or a hat, something simple and quick so I can get the feeling of accomplishment. But then I'll go to YouTube and try and figure out what various techniques I need to know as I'm knitting the hat. And I run into something that I don't understand from the written instruction. Actually, one of the nice things about using YouTube as a resource is that there are so many knitting teachers out there that have put out little tutorials about things that if you can't quite see what you're looking for or you're still not getting it, just go to another teacher and see it from a different perspective.
And do you like to learn new techniques, or do you prefer to stick to the ones that you know?
So much of my knitting thing is about challenging myself. So I remember when I learned the Norwegian purl and sitting in a class and learning to do that. And people were like looking at this like, what the heck am I doing? And the instant I got it, I just sat there and like giggled for like 10 minutes. I was so excited. I love trying new things.
Yeah, me too. If I see something that is interesting and it seems like something new there, I'm going to go for it always.
I love trying new things, but they don't tend to stick with me. I try it once and then forget about it. I tend to go back to my familiar techniques.
Yeah.
So
it depends on how quickly I pick it up sometimes as to whether it sticks in my repertoire. Things like, slip stitch patterns and mosaic, I really took to those early on. Took several attempts at brioche for me to like it because it creates such a different type of fabric. I just was like, this is weird to me. I learned how to do it a couple years back and haven't really picked it back up until recently. Lace, like I took to lace like that and was like constantly knitting it for probably 2 or 3 years. Every project was a lace project. I actually did some double knitting. I think it was like an 8-foot long scarf that I actually designed with cats and cat paws, and all. It was really cute. But once I finished it, I never went back to double knitting, which I really should, because it's such a great tool to have in your toolbox in terms of knitting techniques and being able to do things.
I think that's what I like about the new techniques. I feel that I have more and more freedom as a designer to have every tool that you want to do whatever you want is very liberating.
It's nice to be able to look at any pattern that comes along. If you're scrolling through Instagram and you're like, oh my God, that looks so pretty, and not being intimidated by, oh, but it has this technique that I don't understand, and being able to just say, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't know how to knit.
At one point I didn't know how to knit. Right? I figured that out. So
yeah, so what's the difference? Yeah. It's like the worst part is over, right? You know how to hold the needles. That's the hardest part, to get used to holding the needles and once you know that, it's like just how to organize the stitches. Have you noticed new trends in knitwear designs or techniques that people started to use?
Several projects that have come out in December that, of course, caught my eye do include a lot of brioche and a lot of color work, because December is Advent yarn season, and so everybody was looking for a pattern that they could use their new Advent collection with. So there's lots of color vibrancy to those.
I feel like for the last year or so, there's been, tons and tons of mohairs and everything. Lots of holding mohair together with other yarn. Everything has a fuzzy halo. For garment construction, it's very popular right now to want top down in the round.
And also the puff sleeves, the sleeves that go like a bell, and then at the bottom they are tight. After asking myself the question and answering that, most of my inspiration is from Ravelry, and when I look at Ravelry, it feels like it's the same. So I decided to go and look at some trends outside of Ravelry. So that's going to be segue for our challenge. Let's take a look at some trends. It's really cool. So if we talk about texture, you can see a lot of all over cables. I think that all four of us and many of the viewers can make these things, right? I mean, of course, the design is very nice, but look at the prices. I was amazed to see that the prices are really, really high, and we can make these things. I mean, how cool is that?
If you really think about it, though, if you were to hand knit this out of a high quality merino wool and actually charge what it's worth to hand knit these
be more.
Prices are probably in line with that.
I put the prices because I think as knitters, we don't understand what's our work worth. I mean, this is what we're doing. So these are textures. And here you can see some shapes. There are things that really play with shapes and holes, and oh my God, this is moth, ruined the whole thing. And no, it's actually deliberate.
It makes me anxious just looking at it.
That one pushes my ideas of acceptable.
So that's playing with shapes. And the third thing I saw is a lot of colors. Look at this one. You can see that it's knitted regular, and then it's the inside out. The bottom part is the
reverse side.
Reverse side.
Sometimes the float side of a colorwork sweater is often as interesting and beautiful as the original side.
Yeah. So there are some extreme crazy things going on out there. I was really excited to see that because I feel that Ravelry can use a little shake. So now I will let you choose for your next challenge what you want to work with, work with texture or work with shapes or work with vibrant colors. My go-to would be colors, so I will eliminate it from the list. I didn't decide yet if I'm gonna go with shapes or textures.
I think texture for me.
Maybe the Japanese cables. You have the book, right?
Yes.
But you didn't do it.
Texture and color is a lot of how I think about designing, especially texture with cables and that sort of thing. So that feels very natural to me. Maybe I'll try and push my comfort zone a little bit and do some unusual shapes too, or something. We'll see how many different elements I can pull together when we have the full challenge.
Okay, so I think I'm going to play with color and also maybe shape. Primarily color, but maybe shape.
Cool. So last part, we're gonna talk about yarn. When do you buy new yarn? Do you buy yarn whenever, or do you buy yarn for a specific project?
I kind of stopped buying yarn last year because there's more than I can handle in my stash already. It's not crazy, maybe 5 boxes of dress boxes, but yeah, I try not to add more to my stash.
mentally, I don't count something as part of my stash if it's leftovers from a project that I've already done. So if I've got like half a skein left over, that's not stash.
That's not stash.
No.
Oh,
But I've
good.
got a ton of that. So I try very, very hard to keep my stash managed. I started knitting as a poor grad student and have jumped between different jobs. So I've always been very careful about budgeting for my yarn. So I try and keep the stash small, which I think I've done a pretty decent job of these days because I'm on a yarn budget. I'm always on a yarn budget. I try very hard not to buy yarn if I don't have an immediate plan for it.
I have like a small space for the yarn, and I decided that if it's full, then no yarn is coming in until I use the yarn that I have, and then I can fill in the space again. Do you buy the yarn for a specific project, or when you like have the budget and you just want to buy yarn, you look for something nice and then you get the project for it?
Well, you know me, I'm going to buy the yarn and then I'm going to figure out what it's going to be.
I have been that way sometimes in the past, but now I'm definitely a project first yarn buyer. That I have probably my next 2 years of designs already planned out in my head, and I just am always on a quest for finding the perfect yarn to match with the vision I have for a project.
I also used to be like Scott, but nowadays when I buy yarn, it's for a specific project.
I will often find a project I'm going to knit and then dye the yarn specifically. So that maybe is different, but
yeah, that's even better. I think I sometimes have projects that I want to get yarn for, and then I'll buy the yarn. And sometimes I need one skein of yarn, one ball of yarn that is missing for something. So the stores are a bit far away from me. So I'm going to order it online. So I'm not going to order just one. Like, how stupid is that? Of course. So I will add some, extra skeins or whatever. When you get yarn, would you buy the yarn that you already know, or would you try some new types or bases? Like when I got the ancient arts yarn, I don't think I really understood what yarn I'm getting. When I looked at it, I saw that it is wool and it has natal in it, and I didn't even know what this is. I had to look it up. It's like some kind of a plant. I made a little swatch and it's a bit shiny and it has a nice drape to it, but I had no idea how it's gonna knit.
I often try to go with bases that are going to complement what I already have, but I like trying out new yarn blend bases as well. So occasionally I'll find something that has, will be an alpaca merino yak. And it's like, oh, that sounds cool. So, just to try it out. But I try to stick, primarily to good 4-ply merino based fingering weights, DK, and worsted weights.
So specific, Scott.
It's not like I've thought about this being a yarn dyer. I think about bases all the time.
Yeah, I definitely think about the structure of the base. Is it worsted spun? Is it woolen spun? How many plies does it have? And what is the fiber content? And I really like all natural. Done a couple of projects with silk in the bases and really, really enjoyed those lately. But also one of the things I'm experimenting more is like trying unusual sheep breeds and different fiber blends. So right now I'm working on a project using yarn from Clun Forest sheep, which I hadn't heard of before I tried out this yarn. It's not as soft as merino, but it's really nice and squishy. I'll definitely enjoy trying out new bases.
Yeah, I also like trying new different types of blends. Usually I start from small quantity, like I get some minis or some samples from a yarn dyer and make a swatch, and if I like it, I buy bigger quantity. But I do like working with plant-based yarn. Cotton is the most obvious choice, but I'm trying to design something with tencel yarn right now, which is also a plant-based yarn. I also like linen, bamboo, different kinds of plant-based. Because now I live in the South, I live in a warmer climate.
Mhm.
Sometimes wool is just too warm.
When you go to a store and you have a project in mind and you need a certain yarn and they don't have it, how would you substitute the yarn?
One of the big ones for me is looking at grist, which is the length of yarn per weight. Not all fingering weight yarn is the same thickness. Not all sport weight yarn. Sport is one of the ones that's been driving me nuts lately. There's a huge variation in how thick something can be and still be called sport weight. So I really look at like, what is the pattern? What's the original yards per gram? And then also looking at, fiber content, picking something with similar fiber content and trying to pick colors that'll work. If I want to knit with a beautiful hand-painted, hand-dyed yarn, then I'm going to look for something that's like that. Or if I know I'm going to knit an intricate color work pattern, then I'm going to look for solids.
A lot of what Jenn says are things that I'll look for as well is what's the twist, how high of a twist. And by looking at, if you have 100 grams, that's 400 meters, it won't work as well as 100 grams that has 463 meters in the same, in a fingering weight yarn, because the 400 meters has a much tighter twist to it than your 463. You're also going to look at the ply, 4-ply, 3-ply, 2-ply. Those are going to have different characteristics in terms of stretch, bounce, the plumpness of the yarn, stitch definition. There's also a website called yarnsub.com, which can also be helpful. You can put in a major brand of yarn and it will tell you what a good substitution brands are.
At the beginning, when I started knitting, I thought that weight was the only thing that, you need to take into consideration. And
Exactly.
I think that's why I failed so many times.
I like going to my local yarn shop and just consulting with the shop owner. Hey, I have this pattern. What kind of yarn would be good for it? They can usually help you with that. And my local yarn shop also has a community table with anyone who wants to sit down and knit. And people at the table are usually very knowledgeable and they have some suggestions. So I like brainstorming with people. I also like using 2 different strands. Jenn, you talked about mohair, but mixing 2 strands of yarn and make a swatch and see what happens. 2 fingering strands of yarn can be a substitute for DK or worsted, and it can create very interesting mixes of colors. So
Yeah.
possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
One of the things I like to do when I'm yarn shopping is I'll have my phone with me and I'll change it to black and white, because that really helps divorce yourself from the color itself to looking at how the contrast is between skeins. Because you may think, oh, hey, these 2 colors are completely different. But when they play together in a pattern, you'll see that they're the same intensity. And so it looks flat if you're looking at black and white.
So we have the colors and we have the texture or shape or whatever we want to play with. And now we're going to have the story. So I looked for some movies that talk about new beginnings, right? Most of them were very, very depressing. And I had to look very hard to find stuff that are not like my whole life is in, total mess and I just want to kill myself. So I want to start over. So I picked up 5 clips and we're going to select one of them. So Bridget Jones' Diary, I think everyone knows this movie. Bridget Jones is an average woman struggling against her age, weight, job, lack of a man, and her many imperfections. As a New Year's resolution, she decides to take control of her life, starting to keeping a diary in which she will always tell the complete truth. And of course, everything turns to hell. So it's a cute little comedy. So the next movie is Wild, a chronicle of one woman's 1,100-mile solo hike undertaken as a way to recover from a recent personal tragedy. With the dissolution of her marriage and the death of her mother, Cheryl Strayed has lost her all hope. After years of reckless, destructive behavior, she makes a rash decision. Saving Grace, a middle-aged widow whose irresponsible husband left her in enormous debt, forcing her to grow cannabis in her greenhouse along with her gardener Matthew to avoid losing her house. Groundhog Day, a self-centered weatherman finds himself trapped in a small town as he lives the same day over and over again. And the last one is Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire is a successful sport agent, the biggest client that respects a beautiful fiancée. He has it all until one night he questions his purpose, his place in the world, and finally comes to terms with what's wrong with his career and life. The challenge will be make something to help your hero in their new life, like their new journey. If she's going for a track, so make something to help her on her track, and make something for Bridget to help her to find love, or help Grace to grow marijuana and yeah. Okay, let it sink. If the viewers want to join us, they can make their own challenge and find the stories that they like and find the colors and the techniques that they like, and you can join us on the Ravelry group. All the links of everything we discussed will be in the description. And like us and share, and have a really, really happy new year, everyone. I wish you all a great year, prosperity, and many, many knitting, designing, and fun. Okay, so
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.